How's it going, James?
Good. How you doing? Let me clean that up a little bit.
It's all good, man. How you been?
I've been good. I've been good. Thank you.
Oh, I like that you even wore the shirt.
Oh yeah, the I blame. I love this shirt.
That's awesome. My so I don't know if you got a chance to read the first piece I did on or anything, but
I
the
did. It
graphic
was a
he
nice. It was
designed.
a beautiful piece.
I'm glad you liked it. The graphic he did for the first movie was you wearing the I Blame Society shirt, so that was awesome.
Yeah. What was what's interesting back when we did those movies, the early movies, Totally Fucked Up and Doom Generation. I'm actually wearing his clothes.
Oh, that's funny.
So this is a copy of his shirt, but he has
Yeah.
Greg, of course, has the original, the Ministry shirts, Jesus and Mary Chain, all that stuff, all the characters wore. That was straight out of Greg's wardrobe.
Well, it's funny, and he said that when I talked to him 2 weeks ago or whatever, he said that a lot of people assumed that your characters, since you were like the central of all three movies, like that they were all based on him. And he said, no, like I'm not like that at all. He's like, actually, I'm the
No,
troublemaker.
no, no, no. That's certainly true. I think all the characters are pieces of Greg,
Sure.
certainly. When it comes to Doom Generation, I've heard Greg said it, and it's true. He is very much Amy Blue, or can be Amy Blue, but he can also be Xavier. He can also be Jordan.
Oh,
So
of
they're
course.
all, I think, certainly aspects of himself. Um, he's not so much like Jordan in the sense that, we had such a great working relationship when we did the first movie together that he kind of wrote Jordan for me,
Right.
character Jordan. So that, in that sense, that was a little bit removed from him,
Right.
I
Well, that's what
think.
he said, that after doing the first film of the trilogy with you, he literally wrote the next two with you in mind for the central character, with Doom Generation and Nowhere. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a dream. I mean, it is a dream come true. I don't know what else to, as I
You
remember
were
when I
pretty
was
young, right? You were only like 21, 22 when the first movie.
18 for Totally Fucked
Oh
Up.
wow, 18.
Um,
Jeez.
yeah, and I think it took 6 months to shoot. So by the time we finished, I just had my 19th birthday,
Oh wow.
and then
And
by
that
the
was your
time
first feature, right?
that was my first feature, correct?
That's
And
awesome.
then I did Doom. I did a movie with another friend of Gregg Araki's, that Andrea Sperling, our producer, had produced as well, named John Moritsugu. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I'm not, no.
He's if Greg makes indie films, he makes underground movies.
Oh, okay, so his even more indie.
Yeah, so if you watch Greg's movies like Totally Effed Up and Living End and some of the earlier ones, you see pieces of John's movies in there, like
Okay.
My Degeneration or Hippie Porn. They actually show up in the movie
Oh,
because Greg's a huge fan of his work. So I was very, very lucky in the sense that I did my first movie with Greg and then my second movie with John. So I was still staying very much in that, I think, in that vein of filmmaking
yeah,
that was
yeah.
really on the outside of things, especially in the early 90s. And I was just, very fortunate. And then from there to go back to Doom Generation with Greg, which was for both of us, a 35 millimeter full crew union thing. We hadn't worked on anything like that before,
It's
either
it's
one of us.
cool that like your early career is so like inextricably linked with him, because it's really his early career as a filmmaker, your early career as an actor, and like, of what your first, third, and fifth movies or whatever, that you did were all with him. And that's pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize it until later. It's really pretty quite an incredible thing to be talking about Doom Generation 28 years later. Because you're not, when we were making it, you weren't thinking, oh, when we show this in 30 years, or you make movies because you hope that they last. But it was really, I think, very much for Greg and for Jonathan Rose and I, the kind of mentality of us at that time. It was very much the movie of that time. But it's interesting to see 28 years later that it hasn't really aged. In
yeah,
that sense,
it
this movie's
it,
about outsider kids or people who feel like they're on the outside. Amy Blue and Xavier Red and Jordan White, the red, white, and blue, the youth of America being oppressed for being different, not following the guidelines or going outside of what was accepted, in the way they dressed and the music that they listened to and the people that they hung out with. And I don't think that that has changed at all. In some ways we see, it's very much still this kind of battle, in social consciousness, even though I think from that time, what became very much subculture or was subculture became, regular pop culture now. It's just a part of a fabric of society now. You couldn't really talk about being queer or making queer movies back then in the 90s without some kind of judgment.
Right. I mean, like, he was talking about how, the subtitle for Doom Generation, a heterosexual movie by
Mhm.
Gregg Araki. And it's so decidedly not traditional heterosexual movie at all, But I mean, he explained where that came from and all and stuff. And it's just, it's really cool to see how influential the whole trilogy and, that has been on indie film, on queer cinema, on, and I think film in general is really, really influential on all that, and music. Honestly, I think Gregg's movies really became taste-making movies in a lot of ways in the music scene.
It's interesting because you say that because Greg and I were at a screening for Doom Generation last night, actually. And when we were on the way back, we were talking about how moved we were that for a lot of people, Doom Generation had changed their life. And I know for Greg and I, we relate to that on a musical sense. For both of us, all this music that we listen to, all this music that is in his films, I either already was a huge fan or became a fan of because of Greg. And all that music did, especially at that period of my life, late teens, early 20s, it was so impactful. It changed the way I thought, the way I felt. All of a sudden, there was this place where I felt like I belonged with other people who were outcast and outsiders, listening to music that wasn't top 40, that wasn't played on the radio, that wasn't kind of cool to listen to. And when you find that, when you find your tribe and when you find those kind of like-minded people, that's when you really, I think, begin to blossom as a person, because then you can be who you are.
Right.
And in that sense, it was like, again, Greg was tackling this. He's still great at it, tackling that struggle of finding yourself and finding your place, especially at that age when that turmoil is really quite overwhelming and feels like it's insurmountable.
Yeah, like I first saw Doom Generation not too long after it came out, and I was only 13, 14 years old, so it's probably
Oh
a little
wow,
young
so
to
you
watch
saw
that
that
movie.
young.
Yeah, I was a little young to watch that movie. But I found it very influential. So I identify as cis hetero,
Mhm.
whatever. But I think it shaped a lot of how very not icky anything was to me. Like everybody was just kind of who they were, and that was cool to me.
That was
And
well. I think I agree, because I think at that point it's so important, especially at that age, because that's when you're forming your belief systems, and that's everything.
oh,
So
without a doubt, yeah.
to be able to see that, because I had the same experience in my teens, and then working with Greg was, it was eye opening for me. It was life changing for me. I mean, he saved my life in a lot of ways because I was directionless. I didn't know what I was doing, where I was going, what I was going to do, and without structure, without any sort of expectations, it was like to be accepted just to be who I was, and that was fine. I didn't have to follow any guidelines with him.
Yeah, and think like I'm actually a pastor's kid, so obviously there's a little bit of, I mean, mind you, I was not brought up in an extremely strict, like, and it was never like I was never my mom is actually a pastor, and she was never like had a problem with people who were gay or anything like that. It was never that kind of upbringing, but at the same time, like a lot of people around me, I definitely think the stigma did play a part to them, and it didn't for me, and I think a lot of it was beginning with this movie and then getting into independent film, and I was a punk rock kid. So like from the time I mean, within a year or two after seeing this movie, I was booking concerts. I booked shows for years, and so like at a young age, and like at church halls and basements and things like that. And so like, yeah, the music was a large part of the draw to this for me too, because you know um hearing some bands I knew, a lot of bands I didn't, in these movies really, and what's interesting is that I found Doom Generation very young, but I really only got into Gregg's other movies and the other movies in this trilogy much later. I mean, I
Well,
didn't watch Nowhere for the first time till the beginning of the pandemic, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
that's amazing that you even got the chance to see it, to be quite honest, because those movies are not easy to find or to get a hold of these days. I think there was a period when, when certainly at various times, Doom Generation, of course, came out on DVD. And the big thing that, the big push now is that, for us releasing it like that back then, it was just kind of, Gregg had this cut at Sundance and there was no way they were going to release it, which is pretty much what we're watching now, except for story. And so he had to make certain edits to it, that still, I mean, it's the movie people know and love, but those slight changes I feel, do take away from,
Oh yeah, the restored version's amazing. I mean, like I got a chance.
It's like a new movie.
It really is. The soundtrack sounds so much better. And he said he even did some ADR to clean a few things up, and like, but it just sounds great.
Yeah.
It looks great. Yeah, I mean, I have the DVD, I have a VHS, I have a couple copies of that movie, and it's definitely by far. And the only way I've gotten to see the restoration is on a screener right now, because I haven't been close to any of the screenings that have gone on.
Yeah, it's been moving around a little bit.
I haven't seen one coming through Philly yet. I'm waiting for Philly.
I'll check. I just found out I there was an Oklahoma one today, but there was no way I could make it, but I really wanted to make it to that one. Because I was actually filming, and then I had a screening last night, and then I have to go to Dallas tomorrow. But I know that there's one in Vegas, and I know there's a couple in San Francisco coming up. So let me find out about Philly for you. Because if there's one and I'm available, I'll come up for the Philly screening.
Oh, that'd be awesome. The guys, Strand releasing told me they'd make sure they'd let me know if there was a Philly screening so I could get out there for sure.
Marcus at Strand and everyone at Strand, they've been incredibly supportive. It's amazing to me, because at the same time, when we're talking about Doom Generation, as the same goes with Nowhere and totally fucked up, except Nowhere was never released in DVD in this country. So Strand is now in the process of, releasing. I think Nowhere is next.
Yeah, so the only way I was able to get a copy of Nowhere was a bootleg. And that's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way to watch it is a bootlegger on some, run some Russian TV site or whatever.
Yeah.
Which, we're not going to complain about that. We're just happy people get an opportunity to watch it. Because I know that last night, Gregg didn't know there was a laser disc of Nowhere, which I gave to him. And that's part of the reason there was no DVD. When that came out, DVDs had just come out. Doom Generation was one of the first DVDs. I think that year was the first year of DVDs. So Laserdisc were still the mainstay of what everybody was using. They had Laserdisc players. So when Laserdisc kind of finally made that transition over to DVD, Nowhere got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
Doom had already come out because it had been released right.
I think that late 90s period has a lot of indie or like borderline indie, like, stuff in that realm of what Nowhere was, where it's not like super, super low budget, but it's not like a real big budget film. A lot of those things seem to have gotten lost for a number of years because of that. Like they were in that period where they were making that transition.
Format shift. Yeah. Whenever there's a format shift, sometimes they just don't, which is what Nowhere got lost. And we never ended up getting a DVD of it out or getting the rights to do it. Anyways, I think it was quite expensive when New Line and Fine Line got sold. Like I can't remember all the hands it went through, but at one point it was with Warner Brothers and they wanted a lot of money to re-release it, and just release this little indie movie. We don't have a studio. I mean, we just don't have that kind of money, so there was no way to do anything with it. And it
must have been a really interesting period of time in your career too, because you do these movies with Gregg, and then you go on a set like Independence Day.
Yeah,
and then you're back with Gregg again for a little. You know what I mean? Like it's got to be an interesting kind of juxtaposition of like completely different worlds film wise.
It's been an incredible learning experience for me. Again, looking back on this 30 years later, when I look back, I was kind of spoiled by Gregg and by Roland Emmerich too, to a degree. Sure. I ended up working with Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin because they had come into this restaurant I used to be a waiter in.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and they had, I guess I had the poster for Totally Fucked Up on the door, but it hadn't been released yet. And they came in and they knew the poster and they knew the movie somehow when I was waitering on them. And turns out that Roland Emmerich was a huge Gregg Araki fan.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
He had just done Stargate, and he was going to, he was asking, him and Dean were asking what I was doing. They were celebrating the successful release of Stargate. And, I told them, well, I have this movie, Doom Generation, that's going to be at Sundance with Gregg Araki, the filmmaker who did The Living End and totally fucked up who he was a big fan of those movies. And he ended up showing up there a couple months later.
That's
And
pretty cool.
yeah, and to be quite honest, and that's the cut that now everyone's going to watch. But I remember walking down to do the Q&A, and he just kind of looked up at me after the first screening of Doom Generation, just goes, "Oh my God, Jimmy. Oh my God." I thought, well, I won't be working with him again, but I'm so I'm so taken aback that he came to our screening, because this is nothing like the movies he makes
Well,
whatsoever.
yeah. Well, and I mean,
And
like, Doom Generation's nuts, but then I just rewatched Nowhere and want to talk about nuts. You know, like, I forgot how crazy that movie gets, you know?
I'm really excited for that re-release, where a lot of people who didn't get a chance to see it, who have never seen it on the big screen, will see it, you know, again, and people who have seen it, they'll see it like they've never seen it. It's restored, it's got deleted scenes that I've never seen, that I remember from the script, that I remember were cut out, that I've always wanted to see. So some of my favorite stuff has been put back in.
It's also amazing, the cast of that movie, how
It's
many people were like right on the verge of exploding. Like,
I look back with quite a bit of fondness, because we were quite close. You know, it was a little indie movie, so we had these little trailers, and to kind of make the little rooms bigger, we would just open up the dividers, and so it then became like this huge kind of frat kind of dorm,
that's
where
cool.
everybody was just kind of hanging out and talking and getting to know each other, and everybody was very, very friendly and very, very open. And yeah, I gotta say that my experience in Nowhere was, we had a blast making that movie. It was an absolute blast.
For years, I'd always seen stills, screenshots, and things of John Ritter, not knowing where it came from till I saw Nowhere a few years ago and going, "Oh my God, this is so great."
And you know, it's incredible, because when John came in, of course, you know, we were all huge fans of his. We were blown away that he read the script, loved it, loved what he was doing, was happy to be a part of it. He was happy to be there on set shooting his, you know, and so to me, growing up with Three's Company and growing up watching him, to be quite honest, he was a big influence in me. Him and Danny Kaye and a couple other people, when it came to physical comedy. And I thought that he had this kind of endearing quality to him, goofy quality, clumsy quality, but it was also something so kind of right on, had so much heart. So I was always kind of really inspired by him. And being on set with him for that day was I know for me, it was one of the hugest moments still in my career.
So for like
everyone I worked with,
all three of your, like, you were like basically the lead or one of the leads in all three of those movies, and you know, with the trilogy, while you're a different character in all of them, there's a lot about your character that's similar, especially in like how you're dealing with like the alienation of like that late teen, early 20s like life, and being an outsider in that. And like, was a lot of that the real you?
Well, I definitely felt the alienation, and that was something I think that was really kind of funny. Greg and I were talking about, you know, again recently. I was, you know, because when you're 18 and 19, every day is like the end of the world.
Yeah,
You live and die 4, 5, 6 times a day, and everything seemed like it was so intense, even though it's the smallest, most minute thing. And so Greg had a really, just a really good handle on that. He also had a really good way of talking me down. You know, when I'm he's like, "Jimmy, you're only 19. It's gonna be okay."
right.
And believe it or not, those tiny words of wisdom was like, okay, yeah, I am young. Like, I'm freaking out. I got my whole life ahead of me. Like, what am I freaking out about? But he would constantly see me struggle with this stuff. So it did come from a very real place.
It was definitely, whether it obviously not autobiographical, but being able to draw from that real life experience of where you were. I think that it feels so real. I mean, we've all been late teens, you know, well, if you're old enough. I am actually raising two boys, and I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old right now, so we're on the verge of the teenage stuff starting to really happen now. So,
right.
My 14-year-old lives and dies every day. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, so it's everything's just so intense, and I think that's also there's something also endearing about that.
Yeah,
it's endearing about it, because it's like I said, you know, when you get a little older and you gain that wisdom, you're like, hey, it's okay, you're okay, you're freaking yourself out, it's okay. But you can't help that when you're young, because you don't have, I think, that life experience or that perspective. And so it's like this, it's literally like, as I was saying, what I thought Doom Generation was last night at the screening, is kind of a coming of age film, finding yourself,
right.
who you are, what you're about, what you like, what you don't like. the things that you want to do, the things you don't want to do. And especially in your teen years and then growing into your 20s, that's what it's all about, finding yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, so I found you as an actor pretty young, and actually, as a teenager, I was extremely infatuated with Rose McGowan for quite a while after seeing
Yeah, yeah.
Doom Generation. But I followed your career quite a bit because I love that movie. Independence Day is one of my absolute favorite tentpole like action movies to this day.
Still one of the fun, again, another one of the most fun movies I've ever made. With all the actors were through the roof, not just professional. They were so friendly and so kind and so giving and so patient and so fun. Everyone was so much fun. It was like, so we were talking about to go from Gregg's movies to Roland movies, and I got a little sidetracked. But the amazing thing is like, it's just a much larger sandbox, but you're all in the sandbox playing.
That's
and
cool.
If everyone can learn to play together, you can have a great time. And so I remember after I had met Roland and Dean, and they showed up for Doom Generation, I didn't see him at the restaurant for almost a month, maybe 3 weeks. And I thought, oh, well, like, figured I might have scared him off, but that's okay. I'm very proud of my work, and I still love the guys.
Yeah.
And they came in 3 weeks later, and they didn't come in because they had been busy writing Independence Day.
That's crazy.
And so they came in and said, oh, we just finished writing Independence Day. We were in Mexico after Sundance. And actually, Dean came up with this great idea. I don't know if you're busy this summer, there's a role you'd be great for.
Wow, like, that's so cool.
Well, and I'm have my waiter platter, and I'm like, well, let me think about this. Yes. And well, because I remember when I met them, they asked, so you worked with Gregg, you're still acting? I'm like, yeah, of course. Can I take your order? And that's exactly how it went, because it was the cliche of actors being a waiter. So when they asked me directly, if I'd be interested, and I told them, yeah, I said, I am, but you have to understand that I'm also busy this summer filming with Gregg our next movie called Nowhere. And they said they were really happy about that. That was great. No, nothing to worry about. And this, I think, is about February at this time, February 95. And they asked me to come in an audition, came in for Independence Day. So I went in an audition for him a few weeks later, and then got the call. I was down to the wire already after the first audition. And then after some scheduling conflicts, because it turned out that Independence Day was shooting at the same time as Nowhere.
Oh, wow.
It was conflicting with one major actor in Independence Day. If they went with him, I couldn't do it. If they went with another actor and worked out the schedule, I could do both movies. And they actually went with the other actor, and a lot, so I made it possible for me to do both films. So they had literally, Gregg and Roland, and the studios and the cast directors all got together, and and I do want to thank them for this, because this was, I'll tell you, not only was it a great learning experience, it was just a great experience in general for them to work out where I filmed 1 week in LA and Nowhere, then took the earrings out, switched my part, got on a plane, filmed a week in Utah with Independence Day, put my earrings back in, switch my hair, fly back to LA, film another week on Nowhere, take the earrings out, switch it off, go back. No, at that point, that was it. Yeah, I went back one more time, and then I came back to LA and finished shooting in LA, finished Nowhere. Then I went back and finished Independence Day. So I actually shot those movies at the exact same time.
That's crazy.
If you look really closely in Nowhere, because I know Gregg, I feel so bad, he called me out. I came back from my first week on Independence Day, and for fans who remember, I wear a tank top in the film.
Yeah.
And Nowhere takes place in 1 day. So I come back to shoot with Nowhere, and I have this farmer's tan from being out in the desert for a week. Gregg's like, Jimmy, you got a tan.
So they gotta figure out, how do we light you to make this work?
Yeah, well, they did put body makeup on me, but so if you look really closely, it'll probably show on the 4K. You can see that I have a slight tan mark. And that's because I was just on set filming Independence Day, not 24 hours before that, in the Utah desert.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. And there's such different roles in different movies that in my head, I wouldn't have even thought of that. You know what I mean? That's crazy.
Well, the amazing thing about that too, because people have always asked, well, and since then I've worked on 2 or 3 movies at the same time that are shooting at the same time. I don't have a problem with it as long as the days don't conflict, as long
Right.
as I'm not double booked on a day. Because what I learned on Independence Day is exactly what you said. If I'm in a big sandbox, if I'm on a big playground that has all these toys that the other one doesn't have, that sort of lends itself to what the games I'm playing. And when I go to a smaller sandbox that doesn't have these huge playground toys, I've got to learn to play a different way. And so all those sorts of, not necessarily limitations, but that change in I think resources changes the way that you play your character. So it naturally lent itself for me to be able to shift from character to character without having, you would think, oh, did you have a personality thing no, because the director and the camera and all the actors and my wardrobe and the setting, like you were saying, one's this huge space sci-fi alien invasion movie, the other's this, you know, kids, teenager, alienated, trying to find themselves coming of age film.
I mean, they
So
both have aliens. They both have aliens.
that's true. They both do have aliens. So they do both have the sci-fi element. But the characters, as far as that, were so far removed that it was very easy for me to make the shift. It wasn't something I had to consciously work on, something like, I think you have some actors, like I think this is Dominic Cooper. He did this movie where he played Saddam's, like two versions of Saddam's sons.
Yeah, that's
one's
great.
really, really evil. It came out like 15 years ago. It's an unbelievable movie. I'm trying to recall the name of it, but this actor's he's just phenomenal. Played the good son and the bad son, and they really felt like two different people. That I think might be a bit confusing.
Yeah.
So I'm always, for me, I like performances like that, or James McAvoy, when he plays the split personalities in Split. I thought he was just
that's crazy to be able to play like four different characters.
Like at the snap of a fingers, make that shift. It's just phenomenal acting. Yeah.
So, obviously, I'm not done talking about Gregg and the movies you with Gregg, but I want to just spend a little bit of time on some of the other roles of yours that I've loved. Obviously, a lot of people know you from Donnie Darko. A kind of a crazy role in that one in a lot of ways.
Yeah, one of my favorites. I'm just glad people ended up watching it, to be quite honest, because it was a huge box office failure.
And it became such a huge cult movie afterwards,
That shift was an interesting experience because it was, to be honest, it was a little heartbreaking, when the movie came out and nobody saw it. And it was just, I really believe, I always believed in the film. It's one of my favorite movies I've done, not necessarily because I love the character I play, but because I remember from the moment I read the script, I grew up watching The Twilight Zone.
Okay.
I found it very, very inspiring to me. I still do. And to me, it read like this modern day Twilight Zone in a feature film form that worked in a way that a lot of the modern day Twilight Zone TV shows didn't, for me, not in the same way. Didn't sort of carry this enigmatic mystery and allure and had this kind of haunting beauty to it, that because the script has that. And it took me. And so I remember watching it at Sundance and being so kind of I was blown away. I expected a lot, but it was more than what I expected. And so when it came out and nobody watched it, I was a little heartbroken.
Yeah. I was one of the people that did see it in the theater and loved it from the go.
You were one of the 50.
And yet there were very few people in that regard. And yeah, I mean, that's a role I always, in your later, more recent years, I guess not that more, I guess it's a decade ago now, but I love you in Trick or Treat, or no, Tales of Halloween. That's it.
Tales of Halloween was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love that one you do with oh, that's just great. Where you're the metal guy. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I was so jazzed to be working with Dana Gould, and of course Alyssa Dowling, that plays my girlfriend, and is a phenomenal actress that I've worked with quite a few times. And the story was just great. Classic horror against new modern horror.
Yeah, I said Trick or Treat by mistake because I always watch the two of them. That's my double feature every Halloween night for the last several years now. So
and it's just an honor to be a part of that, to be quite honest, because some of those stories, that Saturday the 14th story. There's a couple of stories that make me cry my eyes out. Oof, they're so funny.
Yeah, that's a really fun one. Obviously, you play
another one, Dave Parker's Sweet Tooth. This gets
that's a great one. Yeah.
and then Lucky McKee's with
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like
Desmond
that's one of my
Italiano.
favorites. It's a good collection of shorts. You know, what I mean, a
It,
really
it
nice,
it
cohesive almost.
really is. It has me in stitches.
And then I love seeing you pop up through the years. You know, like, and I go back and I watch you in some of the smaller roles, like in Gone in 60 Seconds. Like you're awesome in that, and like
Oh,
or
thank
I
you.
love you in SLC Punk. I love John the Mod.
Oh,
You know,
that's another movie I hold very, very close to my heart.
and you did a couple movies with that director as well.
With James, yeah, I did a movie before with. So I ended up on SLC Punk because James and I had worked on a movie right before that called River Made to Drown In with Richard Chamberlain and Michael Imperioli,
Right.
and that was really an incredible experience for me. You know, when I finished Independence Day, I was getting offered, these kind of bigger movies, but I was, because I came from the world of Gregg Araki, that's honestly all I really understood. I did Independence Day and I wanted to do these big kind of blockbusters, but to be quite honest, I found the whole experience overwhelming. The
Yeah.
press, and it was just so large, not making the movie as much as afterwards.
Yeah,
All
the
the
whole
things that
the
come along with
press and
being
the
an
whole
actor.
hubbub.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just found that so kind of uncomfortably overwhelming. And I just wanted to go back to make movies the way I made them with Greg, where you could just make this movie and then you let the movie come out and I don't have to worry about competing or if I'm going to be popular, or if I'm famous enough or popular enough so I can get this role. Because at that age, it was very easy to get caught up in like trying to get that role, get that movie that you thought would lift you up. And being so kind of like, I think, not single-minded, but I had these blinders on that I couldn't enjoy what I was doing at the time. And so River Made to Drown In with James was the first chance I kind of had after that to kind of immerse myself back in an independent film world and work on a character and work with actors like Michael Imperioli and Richard Chamberlain and James Marandino. And so we ended up doing SLC Punk together, and then Michael Gorgian, who plays Heroin Bob, and James and I went and did a little Dogma film. If you remember the Dogma film,
Yeah,
Lars
yeah,
von
yeah.
Trier,
I'm familiar.
gave us a certificate and sent us a couple of his PAL cameras, and we went on the road and made a little road movie called Americana.
I've not had a chance to see that one. I definitely should.
It's a wild, weird one. It's kind of like Man and Superman, very loosely
Okay.
based on that. And to get these two people, well, this one, person trying to find himself, and the other person that I play, who's really seems like he's kind of nuts and out of his mind, and has got more than a few gears missing. Maybe he's not as crazy as we all think he is.
So
Maybe he's just got to hold on how to live life in a way that we who think that, with all this common sense we have, we seem to have lost.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I definitely will have to check that one out. And so like you're obviously still, you're doing a movie right now. Still acting a good bit, and you've been doing stuff with Doom Generation. I'm sure you'll be at some of the screenings for Nowhere as that gets released. It sounds like you're still doing a ton.
I'm still, I was talking about this with another friend when I was in New York for Doom Generation, and because I'm still doing, I could be more thankful. I couldn't honestly be more grateful. I'm so lucky that my job is going to make a movie. And I have to kind of remind myself, and sometimes I say it out loud on a set. I'm like, okay, I don't want to be the crazy guy here right now, but just to put things into perspective, you guys, we're making a movie right now. We could be anywhere else in the world and not a great situation. And this could be this on the best of days. So let's take a moment to appreciate where we're at and what we're doing, because there's a lot of people who would love to be doing this instead of what they're doing, and they're not. Yeah. And so we also not only owe it to ourselves, because this is, you put your best at everything you do, but for those people too. Let's be grateful for what we've got, because we could lose it at any moment. Awesome. And I think, trying to keep that idea helps me retain this sort of grateful attitude, and having a grateful attitude towards this, I can really truly enjoy, like what you're saying, like, I can't believe Doom Generation is out. I can't believe Nowhere is going to be re-released. I'm honestly blown away, and I'm going to go to as many Nowhere screenings if I'm not working as I can. But at the end of it, it's like, I just can't be thankful enough to still be making movies. I have one day left, and then the movie I'm doing right now, tentatively titled The First Circle, will wrap. and I'm excited to finish this because this is sort of loosely based on Dante's Inferno and the 9 levels of hell, 9 circles of hell. So this is the first circle, limbo, where the souls are trapped in hell, but they don't know it yet. They're confused and they're trapped, and so our characters are having all kinds of games played with. They don't. The audience eventually figures out they're in hell, but the characters don't know it.
Huh.
So
that's pretty
kind
cool.
Of sort of horror journey. Yeah, and if everything goes well, we'll explore the other levels as well. As you sink deeper into hell, you go through greed and you go through lust. You go through the 7 deadly sins, but you also go through a few other things like heresy and treachery as you sink lower into hell. And of course, the souls become aware that they're trapped in hell. And
as a former literature major, I'm very intrigued by that. I've read the Inferno a few times.
I've been fortunate to work on quite a few films in the past few years, especially, but I'm really excited about the First Circle in particular. And I did a little character piece, little indie before that called. Right now, it's just called Godhead, but it's about making movies about actors, and I play a director and trying to keep my actors in line while I'm making this little independent film that means a lot to me. Yet actors being actors are out there partying and being irresponsible and cheating and doing drugs and the things they shouldn't be doing. And so the film kind of it really does explore that. And you have these characters in the midst of this crazy town and this crazy business doing what everyone wants to do, and they're lost trying to find themselves just like everybody else. So I think it's an interesting character journey, Godhead.
Wow. Well, I'll be keeping my eyes out for those, and hopefully both Doom Generation, Nowhere Come Through Philly, and I can buy you a beer sometime soon. So
I hope so. I mean, I'd be honestly shocked if it didn't come through there.
Awesome. Hey, well, it was great talking, James. I've noticed my clock is running out for my Zoom. I only have 3 minutes to talk to you, so I guess we should wrap it up.
Yeah, no, hey, thank you for taking the time. And
no, thanks for talking. I mean, this is great. And I think the first time I had a chance to briefly talk to you, maybe via email a few years back, I think was when you were doing a movie called Beast Mode.
Beast Mode, yeah. It's funny. Someone just brought a DVD and I signed it. I'm like, I need to get the DVD of that last night.
Yeah, and over the last several years, I got to watch like Punk's Dead and see you reprise John the Mod.
Oh, that was a lot of fun to go back and play with that, and to be with Devin again, and of course the new actors are just
it's just so cool to get to see like some of the stuff you've been doing, and I'm excited that I get to see restored versions of these great movies that you did with Gregg, and again, I'm sure I'll be reaching out again to try to talk to you about Nowhere and more and other stuff. So
yeah, I would love to talk to you about that. And if there's anything that you need that past this that you're missing, feel free to contact me.
Of course.
Of course, I'll always respond and get back to you. And also, yeah, so I guess I want to say the pandemic makes you lose time, but I do have a couple movies out right now.
Okay.
That people can watch. Challenger being one of them.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that, but I haven't. I mean, I've heard about it, but I haven't seen anything about it. So I got to look more into that. Do you know where that's available?
It's available on Amazon and Apple, and cool. It's available streaming. And I have another one called Without Ward that was one of Martin Landau's last films that I'm really.
That's really cool.
Kind of both of those movies actually, and I think because of the pandemic, I'm still like, well, I did plug it last year, but I got to continue to kind of plug it because those are the kind of movies I do. But I think I was very lucky to work with some talented people, and it's also I'm slipping my mind right now, but I have a hand. I guess if people just go and check out IMDb, but
and I'll put links to some of the newer ones up that people can check out for sure. That's awesome. And James, I'll be in touch again soon. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Justin. Have a great one.
All right. Take care, James.
You too.